put these in the wrong order. Hold on. Hello everybody, my name is Kelsey and we're about to get very, very nerdy with my favorite books of 2019. That is right, it is time to count down the best books of the year that I personally feel were amazing that I have read. I decided not to do 19 this year like I did. I did 18 for 2018 and I felt like 19 for 2019 was just a little much. So I've only got about 10 here with a few honorable mentions, but I had, like, I'm looking at them now and I had such an amazing reading year. Even with like the stress of the wedding in the middle of the year, I was able to read some really good things and I'm really proud of what I have done this year and the amazing reads that I have had. This list was really hard to put together, but I did it. I somehow did it. I'll leave a link down below to my wrap-up playlist where I talk about all of the books that I've read. That way you'll see my full thoughts. I won't go too much in depth in these. Honestly, I can't even remember most of the star ratings. So I'm just gonna talk about the books in order and why I loved them. So let's get started. Coming in at number 10 is Six of Crows by Leigh Bardugo. My brother-in-law still has my copy of this. I haven't gotten rid of it, don't worry. But I loved this book so much. I had always wanted to read this series. I had this duology for a little while and everyone freaking loved it. And I just was late to the party, but I did read it and I did really enjoy it. I do like a good heist story, and the fact that this is a good heist story in a fantasy setting was like top notch. I loved it. I usually am a more plot driven person versus a character driven person. So like if you have characters in the story, that's amazing. But if it has no plot, I'm bored really easily. But this book was amazing because not only did it have an amazing plot, it also had some really great characters and you learned a lot about the characters, and I loved learning about every single person that was in this crew. It was so nice. I read this such a long time ago that I'm having trouble remembering everything I thought about this, but I did really enjoy this book. It was fantastic. I loved it so much, and it's definitely a world that I would like to return to at some point. I don't reread things a lot, but I can definitely see myself rereading this duology like all the time. Coming in at number 9 is another book that I don't actually own, and that is Eliza and Her Monsters by Francesca Zappia. This is one that I read in May that my best friend Lauren had picked out for me. We picked each other's TBRs that month, and this is one of her favorite books, and it's been out for quite a while. And I'd always meant to get around to it, but I never did, and it was one of her favorites, and I really want to read some of the books that she absolutely loves. So when she put it on this list, I was ecstatic, and I didn't really know what to expect going into it. I knew just the general plot of it, but I hadn't seen a lot of reviews on it, and I'm really glad that I went into it not really knowing a whole lot because it was so good. It had a really amazing mixed media kind of format to it where it had a lot of the main story, but you would also get pieces of the comics that our main character drew, as well as, text conversations between her and a couple of her online friends. It was stellar. I loved it. One of the main things, and I know I've talked about this before, that I just loved about this book was how much the author made you feel the character. So this has to do with some mental health with our main character having a lot of anxiety, and you were there with her when she was anxious, when she was feeling anxious. You were there, you felt it with her. It was fantastic, and that was one of the things that I loved most about this book was that connection that the author made you have with the character, where you felt what she felt. It was phenomenal, and I loved it and really need to get my hands on a copy of this book. The next book coming in at number 8 is The King's Curse by Philippa Gregory. This one was such a surprise for me. This was one of the many in her series of Plantagenet and Tudor England books that she's got, and it is thick. And her books are thick anyway, it's dense topics, it's really complex, it has a lot of political intrigue, a lot of controversy. You have to love the Tudor England era to even be remotely interested in this story because there is so much that goes on in here. But I love the complex worlds that she creates. They're always really, really entertaining. I love Tudor England. That's just one of the time periods in history that I just am obsessed with, honestly. But this one was such a huge surprise to me because I've been putting it off for such a long time because it is such a big book, and I was really wary about it because I didn't know what I was going to feel about it. This didn't really have to do with any of the queens of King Henry VIII, and like that's the part that I'm really intrigued by. But this followed a really good like family friend of his that like was there for him as he was growing up and as he was kind of going through all of these wives, and it's basically her entire life story, which is why it's so thick. But it was so complex, and it was so interesting to see what Philippa Gregory thought looking at history, because Philippa Gregory is a really big historian, having, you know, written all of these books that are based in this time period. Just having her take what is historically there and kind of put her spin on it to see, like, well, you know, Margaret's done X, Y, and Z, so I think that she would have felt this way. And it's just so amazing to see, like, how her brain works. And I just loved this so much. I didn't think I would care this much about this book, but it was phenomenal, and I loved it. Coming in at number 7 is Two Dark Reigns by Kendara Blake. This is the third in the Three Dark Crowns series, and I devoured this book. It's my favorite in her entire series of 4 that she's got, and I think it's because of kind of the historical aspects of it. You get a lot of backstory to the queens, how they came to be, some queens that had already been, like you learn a lot like that, and I just loved learning about them. And I don't know, there's something about this plot line for this book that was so different than her other books that I loved it so much. It was great. Like, I don't know what else to say about it. I've talked about this so many times. Coming in at number 6, which is a surprise to me, because honestly I thought it would have been a little bit higher, but the more I think about it and the more I look at my list, it makes sense. And that is Serpent and Dove by Shelby McCurran. This is the first in a new series by her, and I loved this book. I read it in October. There's been a lot of live shows about this book, and I've been listening in on them and just seeing like a lot of people's different thoughts about it, and I've discovered that a lot of people either loved it or hated it, and it was really interesting to get a lot of people's perspectives on it. And now that I've been so far removed from it, I still stand by my 5 stars. Like, I gave this 5 stars. I loved it. It's a love to hate relationship, and I am there for those. But I do understand a lot of the problems that are in this book now, having had to like critically look at it. But to me, it still deserves to be on this list because I devoured it so much, and I did really enjoy this book. And I'm there for the relationship. I'm there for the banter between our 2 main characters. They're fantastic, but there is some plot holes in here that like need to be addressed, and they're not. So I totally get it, and having been removed from it so for at least a couple of months, I totally see it. But like I said, that doesn't change my opinion on how much I loved it. Very good. I am a fan. Coming in at number 5, I'm noticing now I've got a lovely section here of romance. And the next book is The Honeymooners by Christina Lauren. This is also a love-to-hate relationship where the main character's sister just got married and was supposed to go on this beautiful honeymoon to Maui, but she and every single other person at her wedding, minus the main character and the best man, got sick and got food poisoning. Well, our main character and the best man do not like each other at all, and so they're basically asked to go in the place of the newlyweds, and so they go just to like get a break and hope that they never see each other. And then some things happen, and it is beautiful, and I loved it, and I really do enjoy the believability of their love story. To me, I think it's really good. It doesn't feel like it came out of nowhere. It feels like there was some basis for it because of some of the thoughts that they were having, even from the beginning. I just really liked it. I thought it was very believable, and just everything about this book is amazing. Coming in at number 4 on this list is, oh my god, probably one of my favorite like 5 stars at the beginning of the year, and that is Eligible by Curtis Sittenfeld. This is a fun new adult romance retelling of Pride and Prejudice, and I loved it. It is such a fun modern story. This deals with so much modern stuff in it, and I love it. Like, this is the most believable love story. It's the most believable retelling that I've seen. Like, a lot of the issues that are in Pride and Prejudice that are conflicts for our main 2 characters wouldn't still be conflicts today. So having a modernized retelling was always a little iffy. I'm always a little iffy to see how they're going to do that, but the way that they did it in this book, I felt was really believable, and I think this is probably my favorite retelling of Pride and Prejudice, like hands down. It's definitely my favorite Darcy. I loved this Darcy. He was just a sweet little teddy bear, and I wanted to love him forever. I totally picked this up on a whim. Like, I found it in a Target, and I was like, Pride and Prejudice, yes please, because I'll read anything that's anything to do with Jane Austen. But this was so good, and I didn't think that it would become this much of my favorite. But it definitely did. Before we get to the top 3, I just had a couple of honorable mentions that I wanted to mention here. The first one I don't actually have a copy for, and that is Sadie by Courtney Summers. I loved this book. I listened to the audiobook, which I suggest is the best way to listen to it. It has to do with some really, really hard topics. It has to do with sexual assault, but it also is in an interesting format where there is a podcast to it, which I think is what made it so amazing for me. Another one that needed to go on this list was Voices, The Final Hours of Joan of Arc by David Eliot. I'm hesitant to call it a poetry collection, but that's kind of what it is. But it's exactly what it sounds like. It's the final hours of Joan of Arc. I think where I liked this so much was the writing was phenomenal, but also David Eliot took a very different approach to it, where you also have like his interpretation of what Joan of Arc would have been feeling, but you also have like inanimate objects giving their opinions on what is happening in this book. So I think that's why it was just such a unique and new way to get the story. Another one that is an honorable mention for me is A Spark of Light by Jodi Picoult. I loved this book so much. It's definitely a hard topic because it has to deal with a shooting and a hostage situation in a women's clinic. So, you know, trigger warnings for all of that kind of stuff. It has to deal with abortion, but I like how it was written. Not only do you get both sides of the argument, you get a very humanized both sides of the argument. She did a lot of research to go into this book, and I think it was fantastic. All right, coming in at number 3 on this list is another romance book, and that is Red, White, and Royal Blue by Casey McQuiston. This I'm sure you've heard about because it was like one of the most hyped books during the summer. But this is a romance story between the Prince of England and the first son of the president. It's amazing. It's definitely new adult, so like be wary of that because there are quite a few steamy scenes in here. But I think it handles things really, really well. I will say that if you're not really interested in politics, this is still a good book to go into because politics isn't a huge part of it, but it's definitely a chunk of it. It's definitely with U.S. politics because it kind of is from the point of view of the first son. But it also has to deal with a lot of like prejudice from the royal family. So like I think it was really, really good. I loved it. Like I read this at the beach in like 2 days. It was amazing. Coming in at number 2 was another one that I've talked about so much on this channel, and that is My Lady Jane by Cynthia Hand, Brody Ashton, and Jodi Meadows. This is just the funniest book that I've read this year, maybe ever. It takes the story of Lady Jane Grey in England, who was queen for about 9 days and then got beheaded, and turns it on its head. They decided they didn't like that ending, so they wanted to create a new one. There's some fantasy aspects of this. It was just really, really good. It was very humorous. There is some romance in here, which I loved, but it's good. It's so good. It breaks the fourth wall so much. It, like, the narrators give their opinions on the story because they're changing it, but the way that they give their opinions is, like, so funny. So, like, it's just really funny, and I really liked it, and it was very good. And I don't really even know what else to say about it because I've talked about it way too many times on this channel, but definitely coming in at number 2. And coming in at number 1 is one that honestly, like, it surprises me that it's this type of book that comes in at number 1. I feel like this is not going to be a surprise to anybody, and that is The School for Good and Evil by Soman Shinani. This is a middle grade book, and I have said multiple times, me and middle grade are better now, but we were kind of iffy depending on the story. But this one was so good. I think the reason I liked it so much is because not only is the story amazing, there are so many good themes in this story for young readers, for older readers, for everybody who is reading this. It's very, very good. I just think it's such an important story to tell because it, like, because of all of those really amazing themes, where like it is entertaining. It is set in a fantasy story. It is set in this like world that doesn't exist, but everything that has like they're going through is something that you can relate to no matter what age you are. I think that's why I loved it so much. It's just great. It's just great. It's just great. That's all I got. Well, those are all of the books that are my favorites of the year, minus the 2 that I don't actually have copies for. But let me know down below, what are some of your favorite books that you read this year? Do any of them align with mine? Let me know your thoughts. I'd love to chat with you. Especially like your #1 book of all time this year. I would love to know that. But thank you guys so much for watching. I really, really appreciate it. If you like this video, make sure to give it a big thumbs up and subscribe if you want to be part of this awesome growing family. And I will see you in my next video. Bye!